Hello and welcome to Pest in Class, expert voices in pest management. Today we talk with Laura Gergle, Vice President of PMO for Pest and Termite Consultants. We talk about the importance of project management, her key insights in managing mergers and acquisitions, and creating an environment of transparency and accountability. I'm your host, Amanda Salvatore. Let's get into it. Laura Gergle, you are the Vice President of PMO for Pest and Termite Consultants, and today we are talking about the importance of project management. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Amanda. Super happy to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk to you today. We've never really done a deep dive into project management, so I'm really excited that we're going to get this episode specifically with you because you have so much knowledge. But first and foremost, how we start every podcast with an icebreaker. We've got to get to know you.
Okay.
I have to say I'm very interested in your response for this one. I hope it wasn't too much of a curveball. Maybe that gives you a hint as to what it is. So imagine you are a professional baseball player. What is your introduction song?
Gypsy by Fleetwood Mac. Stevie Nicks is like just my spirit animal. Who doesn't love her? It would either be that or anything by Stick Figure. They are my favorite band, and they gave me an unreleased version of an acoustic song for my wedding to walk down the aisle to. So
Aww.
They have a special place in my heart. So I would say, yeah, Gypsy, Fleetwood Mac, or anything by Stick Figure.
Absolutely. I'm here for it. Also, I love that you had a hookup with them for your wedding. That's incredible. I love that.
I fangirled out. I just on a whim commented on an Instagram post that they had posted with this acoustic version of one of their most popular songs. It's called Once in a Lifetime. And so I said, I need this to walk down the aisle to my once in a lifetime love. And they direct messaged me and they sent it to me via Dropbox, and it's never been released to the public. So
that's incredible.
Yeah. So
I love that.
It was super special. So I
Oh,
love them. They're amazing humans and they make fantastic music also.
I have to check them out because I'm not familiar with them, but they are going to be on my ride home. I'm going to plug it into Spotify. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to really want to get up to bat. I think that's what is what it's going to do. Awesome. Let's get into it. So, Laura, please tell our listeners how you found yourself in this industry.
So it's funny, in this industry, there's usually like one of two routes in, right? You either grow up in the industry and it just kind of becomes a natural progression, or you, like everyone else, are like, well, I never thought I'd be in pest control. I am the latter. So I studied psychology. I studied education. I graduated, with double majors in those, fully intending to go be a teacher. And I got my way in the software and just kind of dove right into the industry from a CRM perspective, just working with customers, training, getting to understand the business, the operations, doing consultations. I decided to relocate to Florida and do consultations for my own. And now I'm at Pest and Termite. So I kind of have a unique perspective in that I've been on both the CRM side, which we all need, right? And we all rely on, and that's how we're able to run our businesses. And I've also been on the operating side. So it's always interesting for me kind of being on both sides. I understand the business, I understand the operations, but I also understand kind of software development. I understand what's entailed on both sides for data migrations, things like that. So, and that's really how I kind of got into the industry. And I've just been embraced by the industry and welcomed, that every time I think I'm going to leave the industry, I find myself right back here. So
it pulls you right back in.
It does.
I get it.
It does. It really does.
That's very common, what we talk about on the podcast as well, that people find themselves going in and out and really making a home for themselves here. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, I want to ask you why you feel that project management is so important. Project management sometimes finds itself on the cutting room floor, or people don't realize they're even doing it. So what is the importance to the industry?
It's newer to the industry as a whole. A lot of the bigger organizations do kind of have already established project management departments, or at least, kind of that role there. I think it's important to any business, right? And it's interesting because especially now we have private equity and other folks interested in our industry when previously we weren't really, I don't want to say desirable, because that's not true. The industry is amazing. It's a lucrative, profitable industry, but it wasn't, I guess, like sexy enough for, finance folks to be looking at and wanting to invest in pest control. So we haven't really had the eyes on it, where there's so much to project management when it comes to like risk assessment, as well as just managing projects, and resource allocation. And a lot of the times, especially when our organizations are smaller and we're at that point where we're trying to scale and we're trying to grow, the project management and business transformation really is what's going to be that tool to get you over that hump. Without it, you'll just kind of continue spinning your wheels. It really just provides the structure. I always say my favorite analogy is the air traffic controller. So the project manager is your air traffic controller. So I'm going to tell you as the pilot when to take off, what your flight path should be, where you need to land. I'm going to tell you this is how much weight you can have on the plane. And it's a little different. Another analogy is kind of like a quarterback, right? So I can coordinate, orchestrate, and help execute, but like I'm not the doer, which that sounds weird. Like I am the doer, but I'm not the doer.
I hear exactly what you're saying. You are orchestrating all of these different facets and making sure that everything is getting done in a timely manner. It's not that you're getting it done, but you're making sure that everyone is on task.
Yes. And it's that 10,000 steps view, right? And a lot of the times, especially as a business owner, we fall into that pitfall where instead of working like on our business, we're working in our business, and we're in the day-to-day, we're doing all these things. Project manager can help with all of that because it peels all of that back. And the important thing I always say about project management is that it has to remain independent. So what I mean by that is like project management should not roll up and report to operations or finance or HR, because if it's not its own independent entity, you're inherently going to have bias, and you're always going to prioritize your department's initiatives. Mm-hmm. So it's a neutral party. It's a neutral party that comes in and is able to help make informed, logical decisions instead of emotional decisions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you want to be able to look at the operations holistically, at the whole picture, as opposed to prioritizing certain departments. And that makes everything run very smoothly, I can imagine. Yeah.
I've been part of like many kickoff meetings where it's like, yes, new year, we're so excited. These are the 17 million things that we're going to do this year by each department. And I'm just sitting there like, wow, who's doing all of that? That sounds fantastic. But like the piece of project management, they call it portfolio. It helps you rein that in. So from that 10,000 steps view, where actually do we have the resources? Do we have the budget? What is going to be the impact on the business? Is it even substantial enough for an ROI? Are we spending more on salary to do these projects? Is there an ROI that we're going to see? Is the business going to benefit from these things, or is it just sort of fluff that sounds nice and feels good? Which is fine. We're humans. We like things that feel good and sound nice. So I get it. But being able to kind of have that neutral third party to put things into perspective, so that way leadership can be more strategic and make better informed decisions.
Absolutely. That leads me to my next question. What are some of the biggest challenges that you faced in project management, and how did you overcome them? It's a loaded question, I know.
It is. So the biggest challenge, honestly, with any project manager will consistently across the board, regardless of industry, like it is not unique to pest control, but especially because it is so new in pest control, I think engagement. There's different levels of engagement, right? Your sponsor engagement and then your project participant engagement. So sponsor engagement, usually the biggest challenge is they don't know what it means to be a sponsor. They don't realize like the amount of work that comes along with being a sponsor. They just kind of assume that the project manager is going to do everything and they just get to say yes or no. I like this, or no, I don't like this, which yes, that is a part of it. The sponsor is kind of the ultimate owner, right? It's usually like if it is something that is impacting the back office, whoever is running or responsible for that, like customer excellence or customer service, whatever you want to call it. Every company kind of calls it something a little different, but it's usually kind of the leader of that department or that work stream that is going to benefit from that project. They're typically the sponsor. So a lot of them just kind of check out. Once you might meet with them and then they're just like, yep, you got this, Laura. And I'm like, I mean, I do got this, but you also need to got this.
Yeah.
Because like your sponsor, a lot of the times the other issue is when you're not getting project participant engagement. So if we've identified key folks that are responsible for doing tasks and things, as the project manager, I can, set up automations to remind them. I've got my tracker to remind them, to help remind me. Everyone, knows who's done what, provide visuals. So it's very visually obvious who's done what and who hasn't. When I have no problem chasing folks down, wondering when and why they're behind. That's part of project management, is understanding the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Because if something's broken, how can I help fix it? But if it's just truly they're like not prioritizing it, they don't see the value, they don't think it's relevant, like that's where I can speak the why and I can paint the picture of the value. But that's really where the sponsor needs to step in, because I'm neutral, I'm third party. If you don't do this project, you don't do this project. I've got plenty others that I can go hop on, but the sponsor is the one that is invested in that project getting done. So if they need to motivate their people, I can motivate to a certain point, but the sponsor really has to be the one to ultimately kind of own that. So those are really usually the biggest challenges. I think the biggest way to fix that and address that is being very clear in your communications and your expectations. I think a lot of the times we think we're being clear, but we're not. An example of that is just for me, I fell into this trap at one point where I was just trying to be very mindful and use inclusive language. And so I kept saying, we need to do this. We need to do this. This is what we need to do. And what I was finding is that I wasn't being clear enough when I'm saying, let me be clear. When I'm saying we, I mean you. You need to do this. I was so like hyper fixated on trying to be inclusive that I unintentionally was not clearly communicating. So, it's just like little things like that where communication goes a huge distance. I think some other tools like project management tools, we have what's called a RACI matrix. It stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. So when you're doing any sort of project, it's a really good idea to do a RACI matrix, because while you may have, Susan and Bob working on this actual task, who, and this is where project management helps. And a lot of the times we sort of fall, well, who do we need to make sure we're consulting to say, yes, this is a good idea. We're on the right path. We're headed in the right direction. Who are we informing that like, this is what we're doing? And if we are making a change, like, hey, your processes may change, or your experience or your client experience may change because of this. And, a lot of those times, those are the things that sort of fall through the gaps. And the person responsible is typically not the same person that's accountable. So like the person doing it, they're responsible, but their supervisor or, whoever is the ultimate person that's accountable, making sure it gets done. So kind of little tools like that are something that really just sets those expectations and makes things very clear. So we're not like, oh, well, I thought Laura was doing that. I thought Amanda was doing that. And it's like, no, this is what we're doing, and this is who is doing what, and, understanding the why.
Absolutely. I love this idea of accountability, and I want to pivot to talking about culture, because I know that accountability is very important to you within the culture. And very often when we're talking about culture on the podcast, we haven't really talked about transparency. So why is it important to create a culture that fosters this transparency and accountability? And how can an organization achieve it?
Without transparency, we can't fix what's broken. I don't want to pick on the smaller companies, but it just kind of inherently happens when you're smaller, especially. It's just historically kind of been the American work culture where it's just like, even that whole saying, like, fake it till you make it. No, please don't. Please don't fake it. Like, if you don't know what you're doing and you need help, tell me. Like, I will help you. I will fix it. I may not know the answer, but I'll get you the resources. I will get you the folks that you need. You know what I mean? But like, if you're faking it, I'm thinking you got it. And then when you fall flat on your face, everyone's going to be like, what happened? And confused. The culture for me that really just impacted me positively was we kind of had this saying of, we beat up the process, not the people. And I really internalized that, and we consistently showed that, right? In our actions, in our meetings, if someone's doing something like wildly inappropriate, like that's different, but if someone's just like dropping the ball because they don't really know what they're doing, or they're struggling with the technology or the tool or the system, like those are not things that we should be punishing our people for. We should be beating up that process. Is it easy? Is it making your life easier? Is it working? Is it realistic? Is it effective? Those have nothing to do with you as a person. And that culture shift is 100% what is needed in order to actually have real business transformation. Without it, you could put all the tools in place. You could put all the systems in place. You could pay all the money you want for the fanciest stuff. But if at the end of the day, like your people don't feel safe to take calculated risks, I will say, But if people don't feel safe to take risks and to try things and to implement things, knowing that there is a possibility that they would fail, like, you're not going to be getting productive employees. You're not going to be providing a conducive environment for creativity, for growth, for change. If people are constantly just like afraid that they're going to get berated in front of their peers, or they're going to get fired, or if they don't feel kind of that level of safety, really. The transparency comes down to that of communicating that safe environment, being able to fail without, consequences. Overall business transformation relies on the transparency of your people, that feedback loop, right? Like having that candid feedback loop where people can say, I don't like this, and here's why. In my opinion, also, you kind of take the emotional piece out of it. We are very emotional creatures. So sometimes some of the feedback you get, you have to kind of filter through that feedback, and you have to dig deeper into the feedback that you're getting. And so, like, for me, a lot of the times that is where questioning comes into play. Like, just, okay, well, what do you mean by that? And let's unpack that a little further. Can you talk to me about like the impacts on your department specifically? And sometimes you can help people talk through that where maybe they were apprehensive or against something, and then they can see that it actually would be beneficial. And sometimes it's the other way around where it's just like, wow, thank you for sharing that with me. We didn't recognize that it would do XYZ. As leaders, especially once you kind of get to that spot where you have the privilege of being considered a leader, if your people cannot like grade you and give you feedback on how you're doing, then you're doing something wrong, because no one's perfect and we can't just always be doing everything fantastically. I've tried.
No, we all wish.
I've tried, and I feel like I've spent my entire life trying to do that. But, it really is, it kind of comes down to like, check your ego at the door, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And it has to be consistent from the top down. Sometimes I've seen it where maybe like the CEO or the president or the owner is all about this culture, but then you've got mid-level management or like supervisors that don't, it will crumble. Like it has to be consistent at all levels. The other piece of transparency really is that's where your systems and data comes into play, right? Because data provides us transparency on its own. And data is data. Data doesn't have feelings. Data doesn't get upset if it's negative. It's just, it is what it is. And it provides us that information that we need. So it kind of gives us, it's like two levels of transparency. We've got personal and personnel transparency. And then we've got transparency on the data side where we can look and see, is what we're doing being successful? How is the business benefiting or not benefiting? And data really kind of gives us that added insight to make just more strategic and well-informed decisions.
This leads me to my next question, because I think that there is a lot to unpack about dealing with and implementing a new process and navigating that. So what do you think companies might not understand about adopting a new process, and how can they navigate it so they are successful in the end, and maybe even quicker than they had originally thought?
Interesting you say quicker than you initially thought. It's usually the opposite, right? Adoption tends to take more time. Again, it depends on what the process is. We, as humans, uniquely don't like change, even though our entire existence is here because of change. We don't like it. So you are constantly kind of battling that. I will say that especially when you are implementing some sort of technology or system, it will take time. Even if you get it implemented, 30 days, boom, it's implemented. It's going to take time to get it to be a part of folks' everyday, day-to-day, regular routine process. So from like an implementation standpoint, I always look at it as like implementation versus adoption. You can implement quickly. How quickly can you adopt? It comes down to, and I cannot stress this enough, like documentation. It just, in my experience, it's like rampant, right? Like we just don't document things. You've got one person that knows how to do everything and everything's just in their brain. And if that person, is out on vacation, or if, God forbid something terrible happened to them, it's like the whole company would just crumble because no one would know what to possibly do. And we just can't operate like that at all. We need to have documentation. And if you have legible, easy to follow, easy to digest documentation, that goes a long way. It's also what I will say from my background in education, not everyone is a trainer. So make sure you have the right people in those roles. Just because someone might be a rock star at billing and that is like their sweet spot and they know anything and everything, they might be the worst trainer on the world. And they sit down with a new person, or they sit down even trying to get the stuff out of their brain and into a document, and it's just an absolute disorganized nightmare. Not everyone is a trainer. So it's like, make sure that you have the right people with the right skills, kind of like following in the path that they should be.
I do want to move on to mergers and acquisitions because it lends into what we were just talking about. About really being able to identify someone's talents.
Yes.
And I know that that's a bit of a superpower for you. So can you share any key insights or lessons that you learned on managing M&As, and particularly in identifying and integrating talent from acquired companies?
I will say the people part is my favorite part. This industry, we are incredibly operations focused, which is understandable, right? Because without our technicians and, our field operators, we would cease to exist. But we are very aware of kind of the service professional needs, and we tend to have a lot of support, whether it be like a branch manager or even kind of like the owner involved in spending time with the people and showing presence and getting there. But like the back office is the other backbone of our companies. And without them, even if you have techs out there, someone's got to do everything else. Someone's got to schedule, someone's got to bill, someone's got to chase down those bills, someone's got to answer all the phone calls, someone's got to sell. Like there's just so many different departments and opportunities there that I feel a lot of the times kind of get not neglected, but it's like the focus is more on the operations, right? For me, I noticed that we need someone to kind of be the representative for those back office folks. Like they need to have someone that they can associate with. And especially when you're in different locations, that's when it gets really hard, right? Because your headquarters may be really far from where their office is. So you don't see them. You're not really able to interact with them in person on a regular basis. And yes, we have Microsoft Teams or Zoom or Google Meet or what have you, which is all good and well. But, even with that, like there is something that is to be said about in-person connection and communication, especially post-acquisition, kind of understanding the psyche of those people, right? Am I going to lose my job? Are they just going to fire everyone? Can I trust anything that they say? I would always try to show up and be as empathetic as I could and as transparent as I could, right? Because that's what we're there to do, right? And just give me the opportunity to earn your trust, which again goes back to kind of documentation, communication, clearly communicating what is changing, what is not going to change. You know, if you cannot clearly communicate that and like provide them with some sort of documentation, because probably everything you say and do that day that they find out their company is sold is just gonna be like, I'm not even sure what just happened. Give them something to take home and read later that like explains who you are, you know, what your plans are, what your goals are, and let them digest it like on their own time. You know, one of my former companies, we ended up actually developing a position from this one individual. I had met her actually on my first day one that I got thrown into. I had no idea what I was doing. I was just like, all right, here we go. We're going to figure this out. And I just, you know, I met this woman and I'm like, she has so much poise and knowledge and experience. You know, she does so much more. I ended up going, you know, to our leader and just said, hey, what do you think about the idea of creating a position for someone to specifically, you know, go and spend time and get to know our back office staff post acquisition and be like their liaison and help work with them to learn more about what it is to go through, you know, an acquisition and integration, learn about the different departments that we have and maybe kind of like where they would like to go and work in conjunction, you know, with HR and of course, you know, their supervisors or what have you, but just someone to be able to travel, you know, spend a week or two at a time at the different locations, just really kind of bonding with these people and getting to know them. And they were all about it. So we were able to offer this position to her because I could think of no other human that would be better suited for that position.
I have to ask, how once she started that position, how did things change, or what did that relationship bring to the business and make it easier?
Yeah, great question. I would say we were able to have definitely more retention. You know, a lot of the times you have folks that, like I said, they feel neglected, right? Everyone's so hyper focused and fixated on operations and all the techs are getting all the love and like the branch managers there giving the techs like, I don't know, like TV raffles or whatever. And everyone else in the back office is just sitting in the other room like, oh, that's nice. Like, what about us? You know? So we definitely had more retention. I will say it also helped us be able to get candid feedback for pre-existing leadership, right? So someone coming in like was the call center supervisor already, right? So that's still their role, but we don't know anything about them as a leader. But now their employees have this face-to-face person where they can give candid feedback on their leadership style, what they would like to see about the leadership moving forward, you know, the structure, and really just someone there to kind of ease their anxieties and walk them through as we go through the integration, what to expect. You know, we kind of give that high level on day one, right? But I'm like, I could sit here for an hour and tell you what to expect in an integration and it's going to change, That's why we've got like first 30, 60, 90, 120 plus different buckets of different things that are happening all at different times. So just kind of someone to be that mouthpiece for us to communicate both ways. Like, hey, this is how they're feeling. And like, this is their experience. One of the biggest things that I saw that was successful, it's again, kind of giving acquired employees a voice, right? Including them in integration meetings or like however you run your integration, including them in that process. So again, it goes back to culture, right? With that feedback loop, we want to know how are we doing? How are we doing? Are we just like bombing this entire thing? And you are still 30 days in fearing for your life and your job and your livelihood, because then we're not doing a very good job. And we need to know that because we need to fix it. Because if you're fearing for your job and your livelihood, then you're probably not doing a good job at your job. So we need to fix that. And kind of having that feedback loop, I think is really critical. And I've just found that like we've had folks where they were kind of the manager right under the owner, having them on the weekly calls with like your leadership team to be able to say like, what's going on? Like, how are the techs feeling? How are the techs taking it? How are the back office taking it? How are folks feeling? How are customers feeling? Are we getting calls? Are we getting complaints? Are we, where are we at? Without that feedback or input, we're just like, oh yeah, we're doing so great. Like, yeah, we're fantastic. Like, we don't know that if no one's telling us. So I think just something as simple as that, including folks in the process, you empower them, you make them feel seen, you make them feel heard, you make them feel like they're part of the process, which then helps with adoption, right? Because whenever people feel like they're involved with the process and the decisions that are being made and the direction, they're a lot more likely to participate, and they're a lot more likely to really even go above and beyond because they feel valued and they feel like they're making an impact. They feel like they're contributing and they feel like they can kind of help control the outcome, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
What I'm hearing right now is that communication, inclusion, and empowerment are really going to be the things that set you up for success, making sure you're hearing what is going on. I know that you have had opportunities to teach project management, particularly in the leadership courses that you have brought to companies. So what are some impactful lessons that you emphasize within those sessions?
I'm a lover of Smartsheet. That's one of many project management tools that are out there, but really any project management tool or system really is going to be key. But I have automated emails that go out for like reminders at like 7 a.m. So I'm like, hey, so it's the first thing you see in your inbox when you get there. But I think kind of like what I was talking about a little bit earlier, project roles, I think that is probably the biggest kind of takeaway, especially for folks that really just aren't familiar with project management, is like, what is a project sponsor and what do they do? What is expected of them? What is a project manager and what is expected of them? And then as a project participant, like what is expected of you? One of kind of the main things I used to always do that I would kind of end my sessions with is like, how to be an effective project participant. I like to consider myself very patient and very tolerant, but like my greatest pet peeve is if you show up to a meeting, but you're not actually present in the meeting, don't come. Like, don't come. Either serve for someone, like send someone to serve as your proxy, or understand that decisions will be made without you if you're not there, because everyone's time is valuable. I get it. Like sometimes you have a fire alarm, right? And it happens, but when it like habitually happens, that's when like I have a problem. So it's kind of like, if you're going to show up to the meeting, be ready to contribute, and you need to be present in the meeting. And if you cannot, then like there's no point in you even being there, because then you're just sitting in a meeting not doing anything when you could be doing something else.
We joke very often how expensive a meeting actually is when you see how people are getting paid hourly.
Yes.
So it's always important to know what you're bringing to that meeting and why you're there. That's something that I know my management team has brought to us, saying, if you don't know why you're a part of a meeting, ask, so you can show up and you could bring something that is of value.
Absolutely. I've had that before where we're like just unable to make a decision because someone's like not paying attention, or they're just, and I'm like, this is your department, not mine. So
I'm just air traffic control,
exactly.
all right?
I'm just right here.
Yeah.
Right here. Like, no.
Exactly. Exactly. Is there anything else that you think is incredibly important that everyone should know?
I think the biggest takeaway is that you probably like have been doing project management work, or you're already more familiar with project management than you realize. It's a constant evolution. So even like the systems and processes and procedures that, you know, I've helped be a part of putting into place, and the templates that I've built out in Smartsheet for us to follow a playbook, like those are not cemented things. Like it's naturally should be evolving, right? Because we should be continuing to learn. And that's kind of the postmortem piece, right? Is like, okay, well, what did we learn? What did we do right? What could be improved upon, and why, and like how? And then after that, you go back to your plan and you update the plan. It's a constant thing, which to me is exciting, right? Because it's like if you're not growing, you're dying. If you're not learning, you know, you're dying. So it is like, I guess it could be kind of exhaustive, but exciting at the same time.
Absolutely. What I'm hearing is that it's ever changing and you're always continuing, hopefully, in a pattern of growth.
Exactly.
Laura, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a really insightful episode about project management. I know that you have a passion for empowering women in the industry, and I would love to know your tips and tricks for how you can support gender equality in pest control.
Approach it with the right mindset, right? If you tell yourself that you don't belong and you're an outsider, you won't. You won't belong regardless of whatever you do. So I just always approach, whether it's pest control or IT, which, you know, both are boys clubs, but I reject that notion. And so for me, that helps just me show up authentically without kind of already making myself small and putting myself in a box. I tell myself I am welcome here, and this is a space for me, and I am valued. And so going in with that mindset, to me, I think that makes a huge difference. Also, like create seats at the table, right? Build your bench. If you see someone that you recognize a skill set, whether it's in project management or something, reach down and empower that person and build your bench so you can, you know, continue to grow and go on further and be more strategic and get out of the day to day and pull those, you know, up. You know, I just thought it was interesting at the women's conference, a lot of stories being shared about microaggressions in the work. And a lot of it, I feel in my heart that it's not ill-intentioned. It's just so ingrained into like our society that people don't even realize when they're doing it. So like say something, and it doesn't have to be aggressive or anything, but if someone's saying something rude or disrespectful, the quickest and easiest way to reset that is to just say, what do you mean by that? And it forces the person to pause and think about the words that they're saying. Because a lot of the times I feel like folks, they just speak and they don't think, even though we're taught that as kids, like, think before you speak. And network. I mean, this industry is amazing and it is full of like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, right? Thousands and thousands of powerhouse women that, will do whatever they can to lift another one up. So, even if it is out of your comfort zone, just push yourself. LinkedIn is a huge resource. Professional Women in Pest Management is, a huge resource. They have all their local chapters. Like, I encourage everyone to get involved and reach in and reach out, because you do have loads and loads of support with you.
Amazing. Laura, thank you so much. What a wonderful way to end the podcast. Truly. I love that so much. Thank you again for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Amanda.